The people of Zergoth had been waiting for this day for years. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the grand arena where the most important ceremony of the year was taking place. This was the Alpha's ceremony, a tradition as old as the planet itself. For generations, the Zergothians had relied on this ceremony to choose their next leader, someone who would guide them in times of peace and war. Each year, the planet's most capable women were chosen to compete for the title of Alpha. They had to face trials of strength, intelligence, and leadership. Only the strongest, smartest, and most capable would be allowed to rise to the top. But for years, no woman had passed the trials. One by one, they had failed, each of them falling short in some way. The trials were unforgiving. And so, the ceremony had become a spectacle, a tradition that the people of Zergoth no longer believed could bring change. This year, however, there was hope. The leaders of the planet had promised that this would be the year. They had promised that one woman would finally rise to the challenge and become the leader Zergoth needed. The people gathered, hoping that the woman who stepped forward would finally be the one to bring honor back to the ceremony. Among the hopeful women was Lyra. She had spent her whole life preparing for this moment. She was strong, fierce, and intelligent. Her mind was sharp and her skills in strategy were unmatched. Yet she knew the truth. The ceremony had always been about physical strength, about the warriors who could defeat the impossible. And though Lyra had trained for years, she knew she did not fit the traditional mold. She had always been told that strength was more than just the body. It was the heart, the mind, and the will to lead. But in the arena, it was the warriors who stood tall. As the first woman stepped forward, the crowd grew silent. The trial began. The massive beast they had to face roared, its eyes glowing with hunger. The women were tasked with taking it down, using nothing but their strength and skills. The woman before Lyra fought bravely, but her strength faltered. She was overpowered by the creature, and within moments she was defeated. The crowd let out a collective sigh. Another failure. Another woman who had fallen short. The next contestant stepped forward. She was quick, fast, and determined. Her strategy was impressive, but she lacked the physical strength required to defeat the beast. She too was soon defeated. The ceremony had become a display of failure, and with each loss, the hope of the people faded just a little more. Lyra felt her heart sink as the trials continued. She could see the frustration on the faces of the leaders. They were growing desperate. And then, as the sun began to set, a strange silence fell over the crowd. A woman dressed in simple clothes stepped forward. Her name was Kira. She was unlike any of the other women who had come before her. She was an Omega, the lowest caste on Zergoth. The Omega were known for their silence and their lack of power. They were never meant to lead. They were meant to serve, to be silent, to take orders from the higher castes. Kira had never been a warrior. She had never fought in battles or trained to become a leader. She had spent her life in quiet corners, learning the ways of the land, observing the world around her. She had never expected to be chosen for the Alpha's ceremony. But today something had changed. She felt the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders, urging her to step forward. As Kira walked into the arena, the crowd murmured in confusion. Why would an Omega be taking part in the ceremony? What could she possibly offer that the others could not? She didn't have the muscles of the other women. She didn't have their speed or agility. She was quiet. She was calm. She was an outsider. But as she stepped forward, her silence spoke louder than any words ever could. The crowd watched as Kira made her way to the center of the arena, her eyes focused and steady. She didn't say a word. She didn't make a grand speech. She just stood there waiting for the trial to begin. The beast, still growling in the distance, was released into the arena. The other women had tried to fight it, to overpower it with brute strength. But Kira didn't move. She stood still, observing, watching, listening. The creature approached, its massive claws scraping the ground. The other women had fought, had screamed, had rushed into battle. But Kira remained calm. She didn't rush. She didn't fight with anger. She simply waited. She studied the creature's movements, its weaknesses, its rhythm. The crowd was puzzled. What was she doing? Why wasn't she fighting? And then in one swift movement, Kira stepped aside, letting the creature pass. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She simply moved. She used the environment to her advantage. As the creature turned to face her, Kira launched herself onto a nearby rock, using it as leverage to land on the creature's back. With a quick, silent motion, she used the environment to her advantage, trapping the beast in a corner where it could not move. The creature struggled, but Kira's calm, calculated actions rendered it helpless. The crowd gasped in disbelief. Kira had done what none of the other women had been able to do. She had defeated the creature, not with strength but with strategy and intelligence. The leaders of Zergoth stood in stunned silence. What they had thought was impossible had just happened. The Omega, the quiet one, had defeated the beast. The crowd erupted into applause, but Kira remained silent. She had no need for words. Her actions had spoken for her. As the trial continued, Kira proved herself again and again. She solved complex puzzles, outwitted her opponents in strategy, and displayed an understanding of the land that no one had expected from someone of her caste. Each trial was a reminder that leadership wasn't about power, it was about understanding, about patience, about listening to the world around you and acting accordingly. Lyra, who had been watching from the sidelines, felt a strange sense of admiration for Kira. She had always thought that leadership required strength. But now she saw that leadership required more. It required wisdom. It required silence, understanding, and the ability to observe what others couldn't see. And Kira had it all. The trials of the Alpha's ceremony were not over. Kira had already proven herself in the first test, but the challenges were only beginning. The crowd had barely recovered from the shock of seeing an Omega defeat the mighty beast. They whispered among themselves, unsure of what to make of the silent woman who had stepped forward and defied their expectations. Lyra watched from the sidelines, still trying to process what had just happened. She had always believed that strength was the key to success. She had spent years training, pushing herself beyond her limits, thinking that only the strongest could become leaders. But Kira, the Omega, had shown that there was more to leadership than raw power. Kira had defeated the creature not by force but by patience, observation, and strategy. Now, as the second trial began, Lyra knew that she was facing a different kind of challenge. She would have to prove her strength in ways Kira had already shown were not enough. Lyra wasn't sure if she was ready for this new kind of competition. The second trial was a test of intelligence, a battle of wits. The contestants were given a series of puzzles, each one more difficult than the last. It was a test of their ability to think on their feet, to solve problems under pressure. In the past, this trial had been the downfall of many who lacked the mental agility required to pass. Lyra had never struggled with puzzles. Her mind was sharp, her tactics precise. But she had never seen a puzzle quite like the ones before her now. Kira, still silent, approached the challenge with the same calm demeanor she had shown in the first trial. She sat down at the table, her fingers lightly brushing the pieces of the puzzle. She didn't rush. She didn't flinch when the clock began ticking. She simply observed, her mind working faster than the rest could see. The others around her fumbled, their eyes darting from one piece to the next, trying to make sense of the chaotic puzzle. But not Kira. She moved slowly, carefully, allowing the pieces to fall into place one at a time. The crowd watched in silence as Kira solved the puzzle. It took her mere minutes, but to the others it felt like an eternity. They had struggled for what seemed like hours. And here was this Omega, who had been cast aside by society, completing the task with ease. When the puzzle was complete, Kira stood up and walked away, her face still expressionless. The judges looked at each other in disbelief. They had expected her to fail like everyone else. They had expected her to show her weakness, to reveal her lack of ability. But instead, she had proven herself to be a master of intellect, just as she had shown herself to be a master of strategy. Lyra was next. Her heart pounded in her chest as she sat down at the puzzle table. She knew she was smart, but as she looked at the complex arrangement of pieces before her, doubt crept into her mind. She tried to focus, to push the thoughts aside, but the pressure of the competition was overwhelming. The clock ticked louder in her ears as she tried to solve the puzzle. Her hands trembled as she struggled to fit the pieces together. The seconds turned to minutes, and she could feel the eyes of the crowd on her. She glanced over at Kira, who was standing off to the side, watching her with the same calm demeanor as before. Kira's silent presence seemed to make Lyra's anxiety worse. She had already won. She had already shown everyone that intelligence could be just as powerful as strength. But Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that she was still being judged, by the crowd, by the leaders, and by herself. As the clock ticked down, Lyra finally managed to place the last piece of the puzzle. She sighed in relief, but the sense of victory was fleeting. She had completed the task, but not as smoothly as Kira. She had not shown the same quiet confidence. She had been rushed, uncertain, and it had cost her. The judges nodded, impressed by her performance, but Lyra could tell they weren't as impressed as they had been with Kira. The crowd murmured in agreement. It wasn't enough. Kira's calmness had shown them something important, something that Lyra had been overlooking. True strength wasn't about winning at all costs. It wasn't about brute force or speed. True strength was about patience, about being in control of yourself in the situation even when the world around you was chaotic. And Kira had done that. She had made the impossible look easy. The next trial was a test of leadership. The contestants were asked to lead a group of people, each with different opinions and goals, through a simulated crisis. The task was simple: make a plan, execute it, and resolve the situation in the best way possible. The judges would observe their ability to manage the group and find the best solution. Lyra stepped forward, ready to prove her leadership. She had always been a natural leader, someone who could command attention and make quick decisions. She gathered the group around her and began issuing orders, telling them what to do and how to do it. She expected them to follow her orders without question. But as the situation unfolded, things began to spiral out of control. The group disagreed on how to approach the problem, and Lyra's attempts to lead them grew more and more frantic. In her haste, she forgot to listen. She forgot to consider the input of others. Her leadership was rooted in power, not understanding. Then Kira stepped forward. The group looked at her, unsure of what to expect. Kira didn't immediately issue orders. Instead, she asked questions. She listened to everyone's concerns and opinions, considering each one carefully before responding. She didn't rush them. She gave them time to think and speak. She let them feel heard. As Kira began to outline her plan, the group started to follow her. She didn't command them with authority. She guided them with wisdom. The plan was clear, concise, and everyone knew their role. Kira had done what no one else had. She had united them, not through force, but through understanding. The task was completed with minimal conflict. The group worked together seamlessly, and the crisis was resolved. Lyra watched in awe as Kira's leadership unfolded. It was a quiet strength, one that didn't demand attention but earned respect. Kira had shown them all that leadership wasn't about being the loudest or the most forceful. It was about listening, about understanding, about guiding others to find the best solution together. As the final trial drew near, the leaders of Zergoth were left with a difficult decision. Kira, the silent Omega, had proven herself in ways no one could have predicted. She had shown strength, intelligence, and leadership, without raising her voice or lifting a sword. She had changed everything they thought they knew about what it meant to be an alpha. Lyra, too, had proven herself. She had shown that she could lead and fight, but in the end it was Kira who had revealed the true power of leadership. As the ceremony reached its final moments, the people of Zergoth were left to decide. Would they continue to choose strength alone, or would they embrace a new kind of leader, one who could lead with silence, wisdom, and grace? As the third trial approached, the tension on Zergoth grew even stronger. The Alpha's ceremony was not just a test of strength, intelligence, and leadership. It was a matter of tradition, of honor, and of the future of an entire planet. The people had placed their hopes in the hands of the women competing for the title, and so far no one had lived up to their expectations. That was until Kira, the silent Omega, had stepped forward. Kira's success had been nothing short of astonishing. With every challenge she faced, she had proven herself in ways no one had ever imagined. She had shown them that leadership was not about strength alone, but about understanding, patience, and quiet wisdom. And with each trial she conquered, the people of Zergoth grew more and more uncertain about the future of their traditions. Lyra had watched Kira's rise with mixed emotions. On one hand, she admired Kira's quiet strength and intellect, but on the other hand, Lyra couldn't deny the growing fear within her, the fear that Kira's success might mean that the old ways were being replaced. She had spent years preparing for this moment, believing that power and strength were the qualities needed to lead, and now it seemed like everything she had worked for was being questioned. The third trial was a test of endurance. It would push the remaining contestants to their physical limits, as they were tasked with surviving in the harshest environments on Zergoth. They would have to endure extreme temperatures, navigate treacherous terrain, and face the dangers of the wild. The challenge was meant to test their ability to survive when everything else failed, to see if they had the strength to lead through adversity. The trial began early in the morning, as the contestants were taken into the wilderness. The landscape was unforgiving, with jagged mountains and vast barren deserts stretching as far as the eye could see. The air was thin and dry, and the scorching sun beat down on the contestants without mercy. Lyra was determined to show that she could endure. She had trained for years in extreme conditions, pushing her body to the limit. She was strong, fast, and capable of handling anything that came her way. But as the hours passed, she began to feel the weight of the trial. The sun burned her skin, and the heat was almost unbearable. She pushed forward, knowing that her strength would carry her through. But as the day wore on, she began to notice something strange. Kira the Omega was moving with an ease that Lyra couldn't understand. Kira wasn't rushing, but she wasn't faltering either. She seemed to be unaffected by the harsh environment, her movements calm and steady as she navigated the desert landscape. Lyra could feel her frustration growing. How was it possible that Kira, who had never been trained for this, was handling the trial so effortlessly? It wasn't fair. The others were struggling, their bodies aching, their minds clouded with fatigue. But Kira seemed unaffected. She wasn't pushing herself the way the others were. She was simply existing in the desert, moving as though she had been born to it. By the time they reached the final checkpoint, Lyra was exhausted. Her body ached and her mind was foggy. She had given everything she had to the trial, but it wasn't enough. She could barely stand, and the weight of failure seemed to press down on her chest. Kira, on the other hand, was still standing tall. She had made it through the trial with barely a pause, her eyes calm and focused. She had completed the challenge without breaking a sweat, and as she reached the final checkpoint, she turned to the others with the same quiet confidence that had marked her every step. The other contestants were struggling to keep up, but Kira was steady. Her endurance had not come from brute force, but from her ability to read the land, to understand her surroundings, and to move with purpose rather than speed. While the others had focused on sheer strength and speed, Kira had focused on the one thing they had overlooked: patience. She had taken her time, carefully choosing her path, making sure she didn't waste energy. The judges were silent as Kira completed the trial. They had expected the other contestants to struggle, but they had not expected Kira to make it look so easy. They had thought that an Omega, someone so low on the social hierarchy, wouldn't have the ability to handle the harsh conditions of the wilderness. But Kira had shown them all that it was not strength that mattered most. It was the ability to think, to observe, and to adapt. Lyra, struggling to catch her breath, watched Kira's calm demeanor with growing resentment. She couldn't help but feel that Kira's success was a threat to everything she had worked for. She had spent her entire life training to be the strongest, the fastest, the best. And yet here was Kira, who had never been part of the traditional training, who had never been given the tools to succeed, and yet she was surpassing them all. The judges called for the final trial, the test of leadership. This was where everything would be decided. The contestants would have to lead a group of people through a simulated crisis, making decisions that would affect the outcome. This was the moment that would prove who was truly fit to lead. Lyra stepped forward, ready to prove herself. She had always been confident in her ability to lead. She was strong, she was fast, and she knew how to get things done. But as she looked around, she noticed something. Kira wasn't stepping forward. She was standing off to the side, watching the others. Lyra hesitated. Was Kira afraid? Or was she simply waiting for the right moment to take control? It didn't matter, Lyra thought. She would show the judges that she was the one who could lead. She was the one who had earned this moment. The task was simple: lead the group through a dangerous situation, make the right decisions, and keep everyone alive. Lyra quickly took charge, barking orders at the group. She told them where to go, what to do, and how to handle the situation. She moved fast, making decisions without hesitation. But as the minutes passed, Lyra began to see the cracks in her plan. The group was growing confused. They weren't following her commands the way she had expected. They were questioning her decisions, pushing back on her orders. Lyra tried to regain control, but it was no use. She could feel the tension building, and for the first time, she wasn't sure what to do. She had always been able to lead with confidence, but now she was stumbling. And then Kira stepped forward. Without a word, she addressed the group, her voice calm and steady. She didn't shout or demand their attention. She simply spoke, asking questions, listening to the concerns of the group and guiding them to a solution. Her approach was quiet yet effective. She didn't force them to follow her. She made them want to follow her. The group, once confused and hesitant, began to work together, each person contributing their ideas, each person feeling heard. Kira didn't impose her will on them. She guided them with patience, allowing them to feel like part of the solution. Lyra watched, unable to look away. It was clear to her now that Kira had not just defeated the trials. She had redefined what it meant to be a leader. It wasn't about strength or speed. It was about wisdom, patience, and the ability to understand others. The final trial was over. The group had succeeded, and it was Kira who had led them to victory. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Kira stood, her calmness radiating. She had shown them that true leadership wasn't about power. It was about understanding, guiding, and uniting those around you. Lyra felt a wave of realization wash over her. She had spent her life training to be the strongest, but now, she understood that strength alone was not enough. The people of Zergoth needed a leader who could listen, who could understand, and who could lead with quiet strength. And Kira the Omega had shown them all that she was the one who could do just that. The final trial had arrived, and the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The people of Zergoth gathered in the grand arena once more, their eyes fixed on the contestants who had survived the brutal tests. This was the moment that would determine the next Alpha, the leader who would guide them through the challenges ahead. The tension was high, and the stakes had never been greater. Lyra stood at the edge of the arena, her body sore from the trials. She had fought hard to get this far, but now as she looked around, she felt a strange sense of doubt creeping in. She had always been confident in her strength, her speed, and her ability to lead. But after seeing Kira's calm, calculated approach to every trial, she was beginning to wonder if she had been focusing on the wrong things all along. Kira, the silent Omega, stood at the center of the arena. She was still as ever, her face calm and unreadable. To anyone who looked at her, it seemed as though she were merely another contestant. But Lyra knew better now. Kira wasn't just another competitor. She was the one who had changed everything. The final trial was simple in its structure. The contestants would be placed in a simulated crisis, and they would need to make quick decisions, lead a group, and ensure that everyone made it through safely. It was a test of both their mental and physical abilities, a challenge that would push them to their absolute limits. The challenge began, and immediately, Lyra took charge. She had been in situations like this before. Her mind raced, analyzing the best course of action. She quickly ordered the group to move to the designated location, telling them where to go and what to do. She was in control, at least she thought she was. The group moved as she commanded, but there was a hesitation in their eyes that she couldn't ignore. As they made their way through the simulation, Lyra's mind raced to keep up with the changing circumstances. A sudden twist in the scenario threw everything into chaos. A fire broke out ahead of them, blocking their path. The group panicked, and Lyra's voice grew louder, more urgent. She tried to take control, shouting orders, but the chaos of the moment was too much. The group looked to her, expecting her to have all the answers. But Lyra didn't have a plan. She had rushed into the situation, relying on her strength and quick decisions, but she hadn't considered every angle. She hadn't listened. And now the group was unsure, confused. Kira, on the other hand, was moving quietly behind them. She had watched the fire break out and had already started thinking. Without a word, she moved to the front of the group, her calm demeanor cutting through the panic like a sharp knife. She surveyed the situation, her mind working in ways Lyra couldn't even begin to understand. Kira wasn't shouting. She wasn't giving orders. She was simply observing. The fire was dangerous, but it wasn't insurmountable. Kira led the group away from the danger, finding a safe path through the smoke and flames. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She just moved with purpose, showing the others how to navigate the chaos without fear. As they reached safety, the group breathed a collective sigh of relief. Kira had done it again. She had saved them, not through force or shouting, but through her calm leadership. She had shown them that the best way through a crisis wasn't always the quickest way. Sometimes it was the quietest. Lyra stood in the background watching as Kira led the group. She couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and frustration. Kira's leadership wasn't something she could easily replicate. It wasn't something that could be learned through physical strength or speed. It was something deeper, something that came from within her. Kira had shown that true leadership wasn't about controlling the situation or dominating others. It was about guiding them, helping them to find the best path forward. The final test ended, and the judges gathered to announce their decision. The people of Zirgoth waited in hushed silence, eager to hear who would be chosen as the next leader. Lyra stood, her heart pounding in her chest. She had given everything to this moment. She had pushed herself to the limit, but now she wasn't sure if it was enough. Kira stood beside her, still silent, still calm. She had proven herself time and time again. Her quiet strength, her patience, and her ability to lead with wisdom had set her apart from the others. She had faced every trial with a calm, steady resolve, never rushing, never panicking. And in the end, it was clear to everyone who had the true qualities of a leader. The judges stepped forward, their faces serious. The crowd was on the edge of their seats waiting for the verdict. Lyra could feel her stomach twist in knots. She had worked so hard for this moment, but now she wasn't sure if it had been enough. After a long silence, the lead judge spoke. "The winner of the Alpha ceremony is Akira." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers filling the air. Lyra stood motionless, stunned by the announcement. She had always believed that strength was the key to leadership, but now she understood that strength came in many forms. Kira had shown them all that leadership wasn't about force or domination. It was about understanding, patience, and guiding others with quiet strength. Kira didn't smile. She didn't make a grand speech. She simply stood there, accepting the victory with the same calm grace she had shown throughout the ceremony. The people of Zirgoth had witnessed something extraordinary. They had seen an Omega, someone who had been dismissed by society, rise above all expectations and prove that true leadership comes from within. Lyra stepped forward, her heart heavy with mixed emotions. She had lost, but she knew that Kira had earned this victory. She approached the new leader and bowed her head in respect. "You were right," Lyra said softly. "Strength is not what I thought it was." Kira looked at her with quiet understanding. She didn't need to say anything. She had already shown Lyra, and everyone else, what true strength looked like. As the ceremony came to a close, the people of Zirgoth celebrated their new leader. Kira, the silent Omega, had shown them all what it meant to lead, not through power but through wisdom, patience, and quiet strength. She had changed the course of their history, and in doing so, she had proven that the greatest leaders are not always the loudest or the strongest, but those who can lead with understanding and compassion. And so, the people of Zirgoth began a new chapter in their history, one where leadership was defined by the qualities of the heart, not the body. Under Kira's guidance, they knew that their planet was in good hands. The silent Omega had become their Alpha, and in doing so, she had shown them all the true meaning of strength.